You're live on this.
Alright, cool. And make sure to go to my profile and then share it.
Alright, we're ready to go. I'm going to start this theme song up. And off we go.
Now we have greater access to seeing them happen in front of us. It's confusing and sometimes painful. But in the end, love sets it all free. That's love.
This is the intro
That's the
song.
only answer.
It kind of gets you in the mood.
From the soul, y'all.
Alright, Chris, I'm going to bring you in just a bit.
Hello world, welcome to Meet Them Mondays on Jolt Radio. I'm your host, Cristian Portilla, and today we're talking all things Miami Book Fair, local authors, and independent publications. Today in the studio we have Jan Becker.
Hello.
Get a little closer to the mic. We have Jan Becker.
Hello.
Hey, there you go. And she is the author of the Sunshine Chronicles, an inventive compilation of Facebook posts. So here we have the book for all you Facebook people out there. And before we get into it, she's going to be speaking with me about the Miami Book Fair taking place next month, November 12th to the 19th. So full disclosure, we'll get into the Miami Book Fair first. You work for them.
I do.
You do. And what is it that you do there? And let's talk about the book fair first and how this whole thing came about.
Okay. Well, for the past 4 years, I've been working for Book Fair as one of their copywriters. I've been helping them write copy for their webpage for the big book fair in November. And then this year, when I graduated, I took a job as their marketing and communications coordinator. So I help out with advertising. I write their newsletter. And that's pretty much it. I write copy.
All right, cool. And talk to us about the Miami Book Fair for the listeners out there. What is it? What can people expect if they haven't heard of it? Why should they come out?
Miami Book Fair is the most amazing place in the entire world if you love books. We're having more than 500 authors come this year. Joe Biden's coming.
Your baby daddy?
Yeah. Dan Rather will be there. Al Franken. We have programs in Creole, in Spanish, in English, and we have translations from Creole to English and from English to Creole for the Caribbean program.
You guys have like a big section on like children's books, which is something I really love.
Yeah, there's a huge children's alley with lots and lots of activities for the kids. There's a community gathering spot called The Porch, where there'll be live music and different literary events and different just fun things.
Is that new this year?
No, we had it last year, and then the year before it was the Swamp.
Okay,
Which was
I
sort
didn't
of
recall
like-
the porch.
It was sort of like weird Florida stuff when it was the Swamp, and the Porch is more like a community gathering area. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on there this year.
And so sometimes people confuse the street fair versus like the other programming for the Miami Book Fair. So how do you separate those ideas?
Well, the street fair has, I think they're having like 600 exhibitors this year, where people set up booths. There are self-published writers on Writers Row that sign their books for people that stop by. There are book vendors, and last year I got a whole bunch of chili peppers from like all over the world, and some curry and Indian spices from one of the vendors.
What?
So it's sort of like a literary flea market. There's a lot of antique books and
I like
all
that.
kinds of cool things going on at the street fair.
Okay.
And there's people walking through the street on stilts and dressed
it's like
up
carnaval or something like that.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
And then the other part of it, the other leg of it that is not the street fair is more like Joe Biden coming or Noah Trevor.
Not this year, but he came last year.
Last year.
Yeah, those are, well, throughout the week we have evenings with events where we have different people that come every night to speak. Usually 2 a night. Patty Smith is coming. Isabella Allende is coming. Lots and lots of notable writers are coming. And then on the weekend it all blows up and there's more writers than you could possibly know what to do with. It's always a challenge for me when I'm planning what I want to go see to figure out who I want to go see, because there's always like 3 or 4 panels I want to visit.
How do you figure it out?
Sometimes I just throw darts at the program and figure it out that way, whichever way the dart lands.
Nice. I actually went last year and I took my nephew and I went with some friends and it was his first time, and what I really loved about it is like how it's like very family oriented, but then you also have like, you know, the indie kids, or like it's just all types of people, and it's very international. You have people from all over the world coming.
Oh
by.
yeah. And during the weekend, I'm usually working in the hospitality suite with the authors at their hotel, which is really cool because I get to have them, you know, I get to help them get their breakfast and just get to see them as regular people. And I'll be doing that again this year. I'll be working in the hotel.
Nice. So for people just, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, actually Miami Book Fair is the thing that brought me to South Florida. I came down for a visit, and the person who was hosting me during the visit had a program for the fair, and now I help write the program. And
how everything comes full circle, right?
Yeah, but he said, you know, if you move down here, there's a great writing community, and I know you want to go to grad school for writing, so you should think about it. You could end up presenting at the book fair.
Or publishing your book.
Yeah, and I'm doing that this year.
Right?
So.
Well, congrats on that, and for listeners, the Miami Book Fair takes place November 12th to the 19th. Right. So let's get into the Sunshine Chronicles and why we're here today, which is your book. And what I found most interesting when I first met you was that, I mean, it automatically catches you. It's a book about your Facebook posts. And it's over like a 3-year span, you were telling me earlier, of Facebook posts. And I remember thinking, like, this is such a modern thing for writers, like writing about your social media, putting it all together out there. I mean, it's certainly not something brand new, but I really love the way that you did it, and it has like a humor to it and stuff like that. So from what you were telling me, it took 3.5 months to publish. 3.5 months?
Yeah, from the moment that my editor JJ Colagrin contacted me till we had the book published online was roughly 3.5 months.
So how did that relationship come about? How did you end up getting this idea? He reached out to you, or?
I had been struggling to write my thesis at FIU for a long time, and my professors would say, why don't you take your Facebook posts and make a book out of them? Because I always posted about weird things. I have strange encounters with my neighbors. And I think I have an atypical way of looking at the world.
Mm-hmm.
So my professors had put like a little bug in my ear, and Lisette Mendez from the book fair had also said, you really need to do something with your Facebook posts. And then JJ contacted me, and initially I said, no, JJ, I don't have anything that you could publish. He was starting a micropress, and he needed like another book to like fill out his catalog so he could have a full catalog of books. And I thought about it for a day or two, and then I got back in touch with him and said, actually, I do have this one thing, but it's probably going to take about a year to put it together. And this guy moves quick. JJ is a really fast thinker. He's very brilliant. He has a lot of ideas, and I can't keep up with his brain sometimes. And probably within a week and a half, 2 weeks, he had edited 2,455 pages down to about 350, and then gave that to me, and it took me another month or two to edit it down into what is the final version of the book.
Nice. And so just to go back a little bit, why did you have your professors on your Facebook?
Well, I don't know. They liked me, I guess. They wanted to be my friend.
Okay, I'm like, what? But it had nothing to do, because you also teach, right?
Yes, I do. I don't allow my students to be my Facebook friend until after they finish my class and get a grade.
Okay. I was thinking
And
that
then
maybe.
If they still like me after they get a grade, then they can be my friend.
That's fair. And so with the book, the Jitney books, let's talk a little bit about JJ's background and the microcrust that you were talking about earlier.
Okay. JJ just started, he just finished up his first year as a real professor. Like, he's not an adjunct anymore, he's an actual faculty member at Miami-Dade College. He teaches English and creative writing, and I believe literature, and composition. And I don't know why he decided he wanted to start a press. He's probably a bit of a masochist because it's an awful lot of work, and he teaches a very heavy load at the college. But I knew him because he's a graduate of the same master's program I went through at Florida International.
And how did he get into Jitney? And because Jitney is the company that published you.
Well, I believe what happened was he attended a book fair sponsored event at the Writers Institute that they have every spring.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the book doctors were coming in to talk about the changes in publishing, because it's a lot easier now to start a press and to actually become a publisher than it was like 15, 20 years ago. So I think he thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was. But he's found some really good writers. I mean, aside from me, not that I'm speaking of my
Humble
own.
brag?
Yeah, no, I'm not humble bragging about myself. But the other two writers that are in the catalog, aside from JJ, are they're amazing people and they're amazing writers. Tim Schmann's book, Just Johnson, is like an international spy thriller, crime thriller that has a 490-pound criminal mastermind who's running like the remains of Meyer Lansky's mafia crime syndicate. He takes off for London on some project.
And the other one?
And the other one is a book of short stories by a writer named Luis Garcia, who wrote the book while he was in prison he did 8.5 years for a felony drug conviction.
Damn.
And had bins and bins of writing when he came out, and he's an amazingly literate writer. Like, he's very literary.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Sherwood Anderson and Raymond Carver you can pick up a lot of in his writing. You can see his influences.
Nice.
And there's all three of the men that are in Jitney. I'm the only woman.
The only badass.
Yeah. They're all really good people.
What I love is the name Jitney, because that's something so Miami, right? And for those people who are listening out there that are not from Miami, the Jitney is like this little guaguita, or little bus that we call it, and you pay like $1.50 and it takes you up and down like these main streets, or like corner to corner to Miami, and you don't really have like a on and off. You kind of just yell like, "Hey, driver, stop," and then you get off and stuff like that. But it's something so unique to our city, you know. So I really love that they use that name for the press.
I've been harassing JJ for months now to take me on a Jitney ride, because he knows Miami more than anybody that I know. He writes about Miami like it's a relative, like it's his brother or his sister.
Yeah.
And so I've been wanting him to get me on a Jitney, and I haven't been able to get him to do it yet.
Literally, you just like flag it down and just take it wherever it takes you, and you come right back around. I actually haven't been on one either, but I live in Little Haiti, and so they're like always going up and down the street.
I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to get off because I don't know how to say let me off.
And yeah, they speak Creole, no?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Well, alright, so getting back to the book. The way that you came up with the book, how did you know what post you wanted to do? And we were talking earlier how there's a service actually that helps you download all of that content. How did that work, or how does that work?
Well, if you go to your settings, there's I'm visualizing it now. I think it's on the left-hand side of the screen when you go to settings. Down at the bottom, there's an option to download your Facebook content. And when you do that, you get all of your information comes through in separate files. You'll get like a file of messages, your timeline, any financial transactions you've made, if you've posted any ads, or
So basically your whole life.
Yeah.
Facebook now.
So-
Surprise, surprise.
So this service that does it will take all of that content and they'll compile it into a book of, I'm not sure what's in the book because I didn't do it. I know that they combine photographs and timeline posts.
So how did you do it for your book?
I did it manually, and then we got the file that came through was 2,455 pages. It was like
What?
500,000 words, I believe.
Wow.
And JJ did the initial editing. I think what he did was he read probably 500 or 600 pages and said, okay, enough. We're going to cut it off at 3 years. And then if we want to do a sequel, there's more material here.
Yeah.
And then he sent me 356 pages, I think, and then I chopped 52 pages out and wrote an introduction.
Okay, so take me as a reader through the content of the book. What are some of these posts about?
It starts with a hurricane. It starts with Hurricane Michael.
Okay.
And when it actually, it's funny because when JJ contacted me, we were like, well, we don't know how the book is going to start, which meant that I had to write the end because the book runs backwards in chronological order. And the hurricane was blowing in, so I decided to do a series of posts that are sort of poetic. It's 13 ways of looking at a hurricane. And then, I'm sorry, what was the question?
It's funny because now that you said that, I'm like, you know what? We need to remind listeners that they're listening to Meet Them Mondays on Jolt Radio. And if you're just tuning in, I'm here with Jan Becker. She is the author of the Sunshine Chronicles. And so we were talking about the content of the book and like how you decided really what was going to fit in there and how are you going to have something cohesive really. Because sometimes, I don't know about you as a Facebook user, but I just throw on there kind of like either something important or something I'm feeling. Like it just goes either way, you know?
There's a lot of that in the book, a lot of just random posts. But a couple of things that run through the book that sort of work as a narrative are the election. This takes place right before the election, the last presidential election. So there's some political stuff in there. I was having nightmares about Donald Trump like years before he decided to run for president.
Wow.
And there's this monster goose that comes in my backyard. I live on a lake in Pompano Beach, and this goose comes through at like 6 o'clock in the morning and honks and makes all this noise and wakes up the whole building. So I named him Donald Trump the Goose. So Donald Trump the Goose is in there. I have maintenance men that come and visit me frequently because we have a lot of problems in our building with just pipes bursting or random things that need fixing. And they're always like a little creepy. They're not super blatant with their sexual harassment, but they're, you know how as a woman you know how men can be,
right,
like, just subtly sexually harassing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. And then I have a couple of visitors that came, snowbirds, that would come down and decide that because they couldn't afford their own place, they would move in with me for the winter. My grandmother and mother are two of them, and then the other one is the winemaker.
Okay.
And the winemaker is my former partner's brother.
Okay.
And this guy would come down for like 2 months at a time, 6 weeks to 2 months, and just take up a lot of space and boss me around. And I started writing about him as a way to deal with my frustrations with him.
Okay.
And
was there any wine involved at all?
There was. He would bring down this wine that he made, and he'd leave it in the car for a day before he'd bring it up into the apartment. So like it's the kind of wine that you can only pass off to poets because poets will drink anything usually. And I had given a bottle to a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, who's probably not my good friend anymore because the bottle exploded and ruined like all of her childhood photos.
Oh my God.
And then we've had bottles of wine that he's left behind explode. The good news is, after the book came out, he got a copy and read it and decided, he sent me a cease and desist letter, so I'm not allowed to speak about him or write about him anymore, which I do both still. And he decided he's no longer going to visit us, so
You got rid of the problem.
Yeah.
And the cat, you can't forget the cat, another one of the characters in the book.
Yeah, the feline.
The feline.
Yeah,
And the feline is your pet?
He is. He's my constant companion. I've had him, he's 12 years old now, and I've had him since he was born. So
And he's like another human in the book?
he has a very distinct personality that's very cat-like. And as a writer, I spend a lot of time like alone with the cat. I think Joyce Carol Oates has talked about like the connection that some writers get with their cats.
Yeah.
I have what I call the co-pilot's chair that's right next to me, and he's always sitting right next to me when I'm writing. And then if I spend too much time writing, he'll like reach up and tap me.
My chihuahua was the same way. And she's like, she's like the co-pilot. And if not, like, she'll come and she'll paw at me, like, alright, get your hands off the computer, it's me time. And we were talking a little bit earlier about how I thought this was like a very modern idea. I mean, I guess it makes sense because Facebook is a social media that's like long form and you can really write on it. But what about social media, and specifically Facebook, interested you in terms of like putting this literature on there? Why Facebook?
Well, I had no idea that I was writing the book when I was writing it. I was just, writing and observing my day. I think maybe part of it was a reaction to some of the zeitgeist that you see on social media.
Yeah.
Like when there's a problem in the news, people can tend to be really sniping at each other and negative and telling each other how to express what they're feeling.
Absolutely.
And I probably got a little bit tired of hearing that. I mean, it's not that I don't believe that people should be politically correct, but I think political correctness has its limits.
Yeah.
And people just need to be able to process things on their own a little bit. So sometimes it's easier to write about what's going on in my armpit than it is to deal with what's going on in Washington.
Yeah.
And I think part of it might have been that, just sort of making fun of things. But overall, there's been a change in literature in the past 10 years or so where instead of having like print journalism, we have a lot more online journalism, and the attention span is much, much shorter. So Facebook is a good medium because like this book you can pick up and take into the bathroom and read like a complete story in 5 minutes because each post is its own little story.
Yeah.
And then they string together into longer narratives, but you don't have to spend a lot of time reading at a time.
Right.
To read on Facebook.
Yeah, no, and that is true what you said. I was just going back in my head about like things that I post on Facebook sometimes and how some people come after you, or like with the whole Trump thing. I definitely lost some friends because of my point of view and stuff like that. Now that I think back on it, I'm like, maybe I could have been more mindful of that. But that's the thing about social media, like you see parts of people or ideas of people that you wouldn't necessarily see in like a face-to-face interaction like the one we're having now, And I remember telling you like one of the things that I really like about you and your personality, and also of like how you write, is that it has like this very like dry humor. So sometimes you don't know if you're like, if it's sarcastic or what it is. It's like left up to interpretation, but I really enjoy that about the book.
Oh, thank you.
We're gonna go ahead and take a quick break. We will be back with Jan. And go ahead and enjoy this song.
Wow, we went a half hour already?
Half hour. It goes by so fast. Remember, we're still live on Facebook. Remember, we're still live on Facebook. It goes by really fast, right? I always have to be like mindful.
It's really nice.
Yeah. I'm really excited to get into this, like, and do it. When I first heard this song, I really liked it.
Who is it?
La Bamba. Y La Bamba.
Her voice reminds me of the French, the famous French singer who did, her name is going to come to me at like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Then message me about it on Facebook when you get it. Is there anything you want to make sure to bring up or anything else?
Well, you had asked me to talk about the Miami literary community.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. That's a little bit toward the end. We're doing good?
Yeah.
You're enjoying it so far? Are you still nervous? No, right?
No.
It goes away.
The only thing that has me nervous is that camera because I don't look good on film. But
Who cares? You look great. And this is fun. We're doing something fun, you know? But, yeah, about the book. And then, yeah, we're going to get into the literary community and all
been keeping up okay.
Yes, you're doing great. Do you feel good? Yeah.
You guys need to splurge on new chairs though. These
Yeah?
chairs are terrible.
You heard that, John?
Yeah? No, should they're not too comfortable?
No.
Okay.
Once you remodel the whole studio, you gotta get new
I
chairs.
know, I see that.
I guess I'm very simple. I'm like, fuck it, it's uncomfortable. I don't even notice those things sometimes. But yeah, it's good to be like mindful of those things. Who's there? Oh, yeah, there he is.
So is this all soundproofing? Is that what it's for?
It looks so different online, but when you're in here, like I get really cozy in here. Wait, let me put these back on.
I'd want to bounce off the walls a bit.
Huh?
I'd want to bounce off the walls. I might before the night's over.
You'll poke at it before you
Le pido a Dios que me dé felicidad, mucha paz para mi madre y mi padre, hermanos. Yo si he estado muy bien y mal, ten piedad, ten piedad, ten piedad, ten piedad. De hecho somos de la misma sal.
Oh, did you share the Facebook?
You're coming
link?
back
Oh,
in
sorry.
2 seconds.
That was Ilabamba, Ojos del Sol. You're listening to Meet Them Mondays on Jolt Radio. I'm here in the studio with Jan Becker, the author of the Sunshine Chronicles. Hi,
Hello.
how you doing?
Mostly good.
Awesome. So we were just talking about how you put the book together based on your Facebook post. And I was asking you why Facebook and what interested in you doing that. I'm curious to know, because you told me that JJ, what's his last name?
Colgrand.
From Jitney Books had reached out to you about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know, did you recognize that you had some like literary gold on your hands when you started writing these posts? Or kind of, or were you getting like a lot of comments or interaction on your posts? Or was it more like of a natural process?
I had been told for a long time by other people that I do the best Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means, but they would say like, "Oh, Jan, you do the best Facebook." And as I mentioned, a couple of my professors and Lisette Mendez from Book Fair had mentioned that they'd like to see me do something with it. But no, I had no clue that there was an actual book.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, when I sent JJ the file, I didn't even open it to see how much was there. I just sent him the timeline file and said, "Hey, I hope there's enough here."
Yeah.
And he wrote back, "Holy fuck nuggets, Becker, there's 2,500 pages here. We're going to have to publish it in volumes." So, yeah, no, I had no clue.
And have you felt like your interaction with the platform now has changed since you released the book?
I think I'm probably a little bit more mindful about what I'm posting. And,
Like the way you use punctuation or spelling?
yeah, I definitely do a whole lot more editing than I did before. All of my posts are edited now. But they've also, when I was posting for this book, they weren't public. And then when we decided to publish this, I decided to make my Facebook post public. So anything I've published now,
Is out in the world?
yeah, it's out there. and anybody can look at it and see what I'm writing. But I figure it's a good medium because it's hard to get publicity as a writer. So
Yeah.
if you're gonna be a writer, then to be a Facebook writer is a good medium to have.
Yeah.
And I picked up probably a couple hundred Facebook friends since I got this published. You're my Facebook friend now. You
I'm
weren't
your
before.
friend. Yeah. And what has been the reaction to people when, like, you say, hey, I'm Jan Becker, like, if they ask you what you do or whatever, and you say, yeah, like, I wrote a book, it's on my Facebook post, like, what do they say?
They usually give me this look like, really? Really? Well, I have a book that I could publish about, like, my immunization record or something. You
Yeah.
know, that's sort of the look they give me. Like,
Yeah.
wow, that's pretty mundane to write about, but I always have to follow up with, but I write really good Facebook. So
I'm
they
good at,
really-
I do good Facebook.
And you know, I'm actually, I might have been the first, but I'm not the only writer who's written a Facebook post. Dan Rather's book, and he's coming to book fair. I forget the name of his book now, but his book is from his Facebook posts, and he took them and edited into essays what he had written online.
That's so
And
cool.
so, yeah, Dan Rather's a copycat.
And what have been, like, some of the reactions of people that have already read the book, or, like, not maybe on first encounters when you tell them that you are good at Facebook, but what do people say when they reach back out to you, readers of the book?
I'm really surprised because I never expected people to actually like the book.
What?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to keep my expectations low and just sort of
How
hope.
humble of you.
But they've really, people have been really generous with their praise so far. Although I wish more of them would post their reviews on Amazon because it helps sell books.
Hey. And you know what? Do you have one of, like, your favorite posts or something that you want to read from the book that you recall?
Can I look real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the first thing I did when I got the book was, like, check for what you were doing on my birthday. And I was happy enough to see that you were posting on my birthday.
Oh, here's one. Monday, March 21st, 2016 at 8:29 p.m. The feline is not convinced that Swedish fish count as seafood. And then earlier that evening, or later that evening, the highlight of my evening was stumbling into the winemaker's sack of soiled skivvies. Hashtag nightmare maker. Hashtag winemaker chronicles. So I guess that's where I came from. I had written a series of posts called Winemaker Chronicles. You had asked me where the title came from.
Yeah.
And it was from the Winemaker Chronicles and the Grandma Chronicles.
Yeah.
Grandma's another character that shows up in the book. And she passed away during the chronology of the book. So,
R.I.P. Grandma.
yeah.
Can you tell me that funny post that you had written about taking her to the toy store?
Oh, well, it's not a post in the book. I was too embarrassed to post it on Facebook, but for my thesis, I wrote an essay about taking Grandma to the adult toy store to buy a vibrator.
And she asked, right?
She wanted to know, we were at lunch in Pompano Beach, and she was eating fish, and she wanted to know what I thought about anal sex, if it was painful. And I said, well, not if you use enough lube, Graham. And when my mother left the room, the first thing she said as soon as, like, the coast was clear was, have you ever been to one of those toy stores? And I said, what kind of toy store, Grandma? And she said, you know, the grown-up toy stores. And I said, yeah, I've been in a few. And she said, well, could you take me to buy a toy? And boy, was that was an experience. Like, she wanted to look at everything in the store, and I think she was 79 years old at the time.
Damn, what a fun grandma.
Yeah, but she wanted to be educated on everything, and that got a little bit awkward, like explaining to her what a double-ended dildo was for. It was kind of rough.
No, but that's awesome. And you know, it's funny because now when I heard you reading one of those posts, because you write like in the series of like chronicles, even though social media is one of those weird things where you feel close to someone but you don't, like when you're following along in a timeline, if you write like that, someone as a reader, like, or as your friend on Facebook, you almost feel like you start getting to know these characters,
Mm-hmm.
right? So every day you're like almost wondering, like, what is the winemaker gonna do today, or what is the feline gonna do today, you know?
And I started using the hashtags because people would say, well, who the hell is this winemaker? But if I had a hashtag next to Winemaker Chronicles, they could click on it and see like a whole series of posts about him.
Yeah.
And so they could read just a single story about him.
This is your first book, but is writing like for social media, even though you didn't specifically know that you were writing for social media, but the way that you're writing now, since you know that you may have a sequel or something like that, is it different than when you write in other literary forms? Like,
It is, because when I'm writing essay or poetry, I usually have like an idea, and I sort of have like an agenda of what I want to write about. With Facebook, it's usually things that just randomly happen to me. With memoir and essay, you sort of have to reflect on what happened and like gather the lesson from whatever the story is. And with Facebook, you can just be an observer. You don't have to have this brilliant lesson. Sometimes they show up, and sometimes, you know, I would end up learning something. I remember one time I was taking out the trash and I got startled by a man who lived upstairs, who was coming down the stairway, and I said, you know, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you, how are you?" And he said, "I'm a black man living in Broward County, how the hell do you think I feel?"
shit.
And I said, "You know, I don't really know, why don't you tell me?" And we ended up spending like 45 minutes
Wow.
discussing what it's like to be a black man living in Broward County. And I got an education. So when I posted about that, it was because I had learned more about what it was like day to day to try to like go to the gym when the cops are pulling you over all the time, and like what it's like. I mean, I'll never know what it feels like
But
to
you
get
got
pulled
that
over,
perspective.
but I came a little bit close to understanding.
Yeah. That's really interesting how that happens. And so taking this on a different route, you moved to Pompano, which is where you still live now, from Binghamton, New York. And I was curious to know what makes South Florida unique in your eyes to be a place, you know, where the Sunshine Chronicles takes place, or like, what are some of the things you found unique to our region?
Well, one thing that I found unique is that I feel right at home here, and a big part of that is because I grew up in the military. So I was never in one place for very long. I don't have a real strong attachment to my hometown. I mean, I miss it when I'm not there for a long time. I'm getting ready to go back this Thursday to do a reading in Binghamton.
Oh, cool.
Which I'm excited about because it's so flat down here. But I like that nobody's from here. I like all the different languages. I like all the culture. I come from a small coal mining region where there's not a lot going on. There's a large high school dropout a population of high school dropouts. I think in my hometown of Carbondale, where I was born, the dropout rate is like 80%.
What?
Yeah, it's amazingly high. So I like, even though like everybody thinks of Florida as like the party school place,
Yeah.
I think there's a big level of like literacy and education down here that I didn't have where I'm from, and an exposure to culture that I definitely didn't have up north.
Right, and a different audience too,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, but the cool thing about Facebook is that like, there are people in a little coal mining town in Pennsylvania reading about my adventures in Florida.
Right.
So they're getting exposed to some of the things that I'm exposed to down here.
And talking about exposure, you went about publishing the book through the local micro-publishing company, Jitney Books, which was what we had spoken about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
How was it like working with Jitney Books, and what is the process like? What was your experience like working with a small micro-publishing company?
I think that there are pros and cons to it. Some of the pros are that I had a lot more say over how the book was produced. I got a lot more say into things like the title and approving the cover art, although like who could argue with that cover? It's a beautiful cover.
Tell the listeners what the cover is.
The cover was designed by Marlene Lopez, who's a local book designer and a local graphic designer, and it uses The Little Copper Tone Girl is the name of the painting by Luis Barros. who's a local Miami artist, who everybody else in Miami probably knew, but I didn't know. And he's just he's an amazing person also. He's going to be at Book Fair because he illustrated a children's book called Billy the Otter.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get a chance to check out Billy the Otter, you can meet Luis and see some of his artwork with that.
So the pros and cons about going through the micro-publishing world.
Yeah, well, one of the pros is that I got to meet the artist who did the cover. It's a lot. There's a lot more hands-on stuff that goes on when you work with a small press, because we don't have a big publicity budget. JJ, the founding editor, works an amazingly difficult schedule, so he's really busy a lot of the time. And I get to have more say about how the book was published, how we
like the final product, how it looks and stuff.
Yeah, and not only that, but like as far as handling my book launch, when we launched our books at Books and Books, I got to help out with that.
So you're more involved in the process. You know what it's gonna look like, and
yeah, and I wanted to do that because I wanted to learn about publishing, because I have a master's degree in it, in creative writing, and I wanted to know more about the business end of it. So, and it's also the first year that he's publishing any books. So being more involved was a positive. The downside of it is basically budgetary.
What do you mean by that?
Well, micropresses don't really sell a whole lot of books. My book has been out since last December, and I think just online we probably sold about 100 copies.
Okay, I get you. So that exposure
Yeah, and
is minimum.
advertising, getting a chance to come on radio programs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're not Terry Gross, but it's awful nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much. She's an idol. I could be Terry Gross Jr. But
Yeah, Terry Gross would never have me on her program, but I'm happy to sit down and talk with you.
Thank you.
But it's been, what is it, October now?
Yeah.
I'm losing track of time. So it's been 11 months since I've been published, and this is the second radio interview that I've done in 11 months, and the last one was last week.
Oh.
And this is the longest one I'll probably ever get to do.
You know what though? I find that's, I mean, maybe with books too, but all types of indie exposure, like just indie art is like that, trying to get it out there. But I remember from the first time that we met at Gramps, and I remember when I don't know how it happened. I think we were all like a little bit, have some beers in us already, but I remember you telling me about the book, and it stayed in my mind. And I thought it was such a cool idea, like the whole Facebook posting, and just by meeting you and getting like a feel for your personality, I really felt like you're very unique, in just the way that you are, the way you express yourself. So it wasn't that hard for this to be a thing, especially being local, being from Miami, the Miami Book Fair coming, and it's more people should get into this, because even if you're not into it, even if you don't like to read, like there's always something out there for someone,
I think also, like, we're living in a period of time, and this probably ties in closely with social media as literature also. We're living in a time where we can't trust the media because there's a bunch of bullshit on the television right now. Like, I don't trust CNN, I don't trust Fox News, I don't trust any of the big media companies. And so there's something that's a little bit refreshing about being with a small independent press that's not owned by a big Wall Street corporation.
Right.
Not that I would turn down a deal from Farrar, Straus and Giroux if they called me up and said, "Hey, Jan Becker, we heard you on the radio."
Mondays.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I get you. And so about Ginny and micro-publishing and stuff like that, I read that Ginny was like trying to fill that void by having like more indie writers and stuff like that. Do you know if they're still taking submissions and stuff like that, or how does that work exactly?
You can, if you go to jitneybooks.com, I believe there's a contact us button on the website where you can contact JJ if you have a completed manuscript. He's only looking at completed manuscripts.
Alright.
And you could contact him and find out what you'd need to do to get a manuscript into him to look at. I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think that the press has an email address that's jitneybooks@gmail.com.
Okay.
So you may be able to write him directly.
And for the listeners out there, do you know if that's only local or you can be...
He's only publishing stories that are based in South Florida, and only fiction and memoir, no, and nonfiction. So it doesn't have to be memoir. If you're writing about like something that happened in Miami that you didn't personally take part in, you could get published with him. But no poetry.
Okay.
I don't know what his problem is
His
with
beef
poetry.
with poetry is...
But yeah, no, he's not a fan of the poets.
Okay. And what advice can you give to writers? What did you learn? What mistakes did you make in this process?
I think the biggest thing that I learned is just to sort of relax and enjoy it. This is probably a little bit crude, but I think, like, for a first-time writer, I wish somebody had told me to just lie back and think of England and just sort of go along with what's happening, because, you know, it's my baby. I'm a little bit more of, like, a protective mother with the book than I need to be.
Okay.
And I think just, like, sort of letting go is something that I wish I had learned at the very beginning.
Like just letting the creativity flow and not thinking so hard about it, or...
Well, yeah, and not getting so sort of like disenchanted and disillusioned if things don't turn out the way you want them to immediately.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking of wanting to do things with the press as far as publicity goes and not hearing for a long time. And it took me a while to realize Miami's just a busy city and people are tied up. And you just gotta relax and chill out and let them...
preaching. Yes.
Yeah.
You gotta relax and just let people... We were talking about that earlier. Miami is really busy and it's weird. But you know what? You're speaking to like a creative audience. We all feel that way one way or another, you know?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to feel supported. Everybody wants to feel like, you know, what you're doing, you know, someone cares about. But I get what you mean. Sometimes you just have to let it go and let the universe take control. But speaking about exposure, you have 2 panels coming up. You will have one on November 7th, and then you have one on November 19th. Tell us more about that. Where can people meet you if they're in South Florida?
Well, the one for November 7th, I don't have all of the details of yet, but you can check my Facebook page. I have a writer page called Jan Becker, writer.
Okay.
And you can, I'll post an update when I get it on when that panel is going to be. The Broward Panel College is actually really strange. I never expected this to happen.
Okay.
This is one of those things that, like, just shows up and surprises you when you do let go and let things happen.
Yeah.
One of the courses at Broward College in their new media program picked up the Sunshine Chronicles as a required reading text.
Ooh.
So, like, I'm now one of those writers that I can say a bunch of people were forced to read me when they were in college. And I'm going to be speaking to the class. It's a microeconomics class, which also makes no sense to me because I'm a writer and I know next to nothing about economics.
You're about that. Yeah. And it's you were saying that it's like they're teaching them how to be better at...
They're using the text as an example of professionalization utilizing social media, or utilizing social media for professionalization.
Yeah.
Which is just hilarious because, to me it's hilarious because I wasn't thinking that I was doing anything very professional when I was posting. The other panel on November 19th is at 5 p.m. in room 8202, building 8, room 202 on Miami-Dade campus, and that's during the Miami Book Fair. I'll be with the 3 other Jitney writers, J.J. Colagran, Timothy Schmann, and Luis Garcia, and we're going to be speaking about the founding of the press and what it was like to get our first books published, and then we're going to be reading selections from our work.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay,
yeah,
awesome.
I'm excited for that one,
Yeah.
because it's probably probably one of the only times the 4 of us are going to be able to present together.
That's dope. That's really cool. And are you working on anything else now?
I am. I have, well, I'm always, it turns out, if I learned anything from publishing this book, it's that I write a lot more than I realized I did.
Mm-hmm.
JJ sometimes tells me that he's going to publish like a whole book just of the emails that I've written him. but it turns out I'm much more prolific than I thought I was. I have a book of essays that I've been working on for 18 years.
Wow.
That went into my thesis, and with that one, that's probably something where I just need to let go
Yeah.
a little bit more and try to find a publisher for it.
18 years. Yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta let that go.
Yeah. I have a book of poetry that I want to put together
Okay.
that I haven't put together yet. So I have like random scattered writings that I, at this point, just need to revise and organize
Okay.
into. I've probably got like a whole library. I'm gonna be like Joyce Carol Oates and publish 5 books a year for the next 20 years.
I know. I remember hearing about her. I think I heard about her on NPR, and I was like, "Whoa, that's crazy. That's so
Yeah.
intense, but it's so awesome."
But she's also been writing since like 1872 or something. Not that she's that, not that there's anything wrong with being
Yeah, she has a lot of content.
elderly, but she's been writing for years and years.
Yeah. Well, where else can people find you? And for the listeners out there, how can they stay in touch with you besides Facebook, Jan Becker, or your Facebook? Give us your writing Facebook again, and your social medias and everywhere else.
Okay, my Twitter is
Nah, you don't use your Twitter. Don't lie.
no, yeah, I never tweet. But that's at Olive Poetry,
Okay.
like the fruit olive and then poetry. I'm on Facebook. If you're not a Nigerian prince offering me $1 million, I'll probably friend you.
Okay.
If you send me a friend request, or you can check out my writer page. I think that's it for contacting me online. I'm not like I don't have. I
Jan
haven't-
Becker, writer is
Yeah.
the Facebook one.
Yeah,
And
that-
where can people find the book?
the book is locally at Books and Books. I believe it's at all of the Books and Books locations
Okay.
in Miami. It's also at Sweat Records, and you can find it online on Amazon or at jitneybooks.com.
The Sunshine Chronicles.
Right.
Okay. Awesome. Is there any other way that people can reach out to you, or anything else you want to say to the world?
Do we have time quickly to talk about the writing community in South Florida?
Yeah. We have a couple of minutes.
I also teach for Reading Queer. I teach a boot camp annually, and Reading Queer is a great organization where everybody's welcome. The workshops are all free.
Okay.
They take donations. They won like Knight Foundation Challenge grants to do the funding. They have a big program coming up with Book Fair also, where they're bringing in like Dan S. Smith, who's an amazing queer poet who will be reading. And they're doing a program called Paris is Still Burning after that Paris is Burning film.
Yeah.
So Reading Queer is one place where you can find me for teaching. I also occasionally teach at FIU.
Okay.
I teach creative writing sometimes. And every once in a while for Book Fair, they'll let me teach like a first draft or a one-day workshop. But speaking of Book Fair, I did want to mention that Book Fair is now year-round.
Okay.
And that we have a lot of programs at Book Fair that are to help people develop writing. So if you're a writer and you're looking for a community of writers to join in, come to the Miami Book Fair website, sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get to read my writing like every week because I write the newsletter for Book Fair. But you'll get to find out about the programs and activities that we have
And
at Book Fair.
that's www.miamibookfair.com.
Right.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's all the time that we have today for Meet Them Mondays. Make sure to tune back in November 13th and 20th at 7 p.m. for a new Meet Them Mondays on Jolt Radio. You can also find past episodes on roamfreerights.com. And we're actually, Jan, doing a giveaway for the Miami Book Fair for those listening. So if people out there want to meet you at the book fair, or if they just want to stop by if they've never been, if they find me on the gram at roamfreerights, as in writing, WRITES, and I have all the details there for them to be able to come and get those tickets.
I should mention also that we're going to have, Jitney Books will have a booth during the street fair.
Oh,
So
cool.
we'll be one of the exhibitors,
Nice. So people can get information about publishing and stuff like that.
and also pick up the books. We'll
Okay.
have them for sale there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on Meet Them Mondays today.
Thank you for having me.
This was
It
so much fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
Right? Awesome.
Yay, it's over.
You're like, yay, it's over.
No, well, I'm yay, it's over because I don't like the camera. I don't mind talking. The camera was bothering me.
Do you want me to stop this or?
Yeah, please. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Oh, and before you stop it, this is the Sunshine Chronicles. This is Jan's book. Make sure to look it up on Amazon or anywhere online and add